Hello everyone, this is Jeff Besson, IntuiLab's Chief Marketing Officer. Today is an opportunity to unwrap a brand new webinar we call Working with Data and Analytics. I have the pleasure of working with Sebastian Meunier, IntuiLab's Chief Lead Technical Sales Representative, and he'll be hosting this webinar. If you have any questions, just enter them on the right in the GoToWebinar panel. I'll be monitoring those questions and answer them on the fly, and then occasionally handing it off to Seb. Seb, let's get started.
So hello everyone, this is Sebastian from IntuiLab. We are going to see today how to work with data and analytics within IntuiFace. So the aim of this webinar is really to show you how to read data from the outside world, work with this using filters, for example, with Excel, and then write data out of IntuiFace in an Excel file or using web services. So first, let's have a look at some samples which are available already within IntuiFace, so you can download them quite quickly. Oops. So those samples can be downloaded directly from the Experience panel. Just as a reminder, you can find it here in the Samples tab. You will get all those ones. Those 4 samples are using either data from an Excel file, like the 2 on the right side, or from web services, or maybe both, like the interactive maps. Today we are going to reuse the ones from real estate property search and photo exhibition, so you can see how those experiences were built. Before starting, I would like to introduce a few concepts, so we are all talking about the same things. So first, with the introduction webinar you may have attended already, I hope you are used to the concept of spaces, which are here. So the assets, the collections from the toolbar, the properties down there, triggers and actions on the bottom right corner. Those are all the basic concepts used in IntuiFace. Today we are going to look at a little bit more advanced concepts. First one, interface asset. It's like an asset but allows you to interface with the outside world. It's the last button here in the toolbar which will allow you to import one of those interface assets. A little word about technology. We handle a few kind of interface assets. Excel, web services, JavaScript, or Microsoft.NET for the player for Windows. In this list you will find all the interface assets that we provide directly within Composer, like Twitter, like Instagram search, some Google geocoding web services, the Philips Hue control, for example. You can import your own Excel file or create your own interface asset, which is the one we are going to use a little bit after in this webinar. So let's have a look at the basic one, the clock. Let's display the time of today. So first thing, you see that now I have a new panel here on top of the scene, which is named Interface Assets. These are all the interface assets added to my experience. So if I click Save and publish that on the player, they will be copied with the experience. Whereas here you have all the available interface assets that you can import in your project, in your experience. Next thing is how to represent them in a space, because this IA, I will use IL quite a lot of time today, interface asset, doesn't belong to a space. It's like a global variable. It's over the spaces. You can drag and drop it on the space to get a visual representation. Let's have a look at what has been added here to my space content. I have a group with a few shapes, rectangles, 2 text assets, and 3 images, which are the needles of the clock. Of course, I could add a second one. If I drag and drop it again, I will get a second representation of the same data. The time, the date, is the data which is going to be visually represented in the space. An interface asset, like an asset, has properties. It may have trigger and actions. If I change, for example, here the local time to another time zone, my 2 representations here are going to change automatically. This is made thanks to the binding, which is the second concept we are going to have a look at. So let me first delete this one. As soon as you have added one interface asset in your experience, this little button here will always be available so you can reach the interface assets of your experience. So, binding, what is that thing? You have already seen maybe in the introduction webinar that this logo here has this position bound to something else. Actually, that's the position of the logo in the introduction space. So here, if I'm moving my logo at the top, and I go back to my concept space, the logo has moved. Let's put it back at the correct place. It's going to work the same way for data representation. So I'm going to add a text asset, a simple text, and see what kind of properties are available in my clock interface asset. So for that, instead of here typing a text, I'm going to set its property, its text property, getting the information from a binding. So I can select the target of my binding. I want to get some information from my clock interface asset. All the interface assets are going to be at the top of this list, above the current space, above all the content of this space. So, wow, quite a lot of things here. Let's expand that. So here I would like to represent the complete date time here in my text asset. Let's have a look. So this is what I got, right? If I get, for example, the day as a number, it will change the text automatically. So all the properties which are here are exposed by my interface asset, by my clock IA, and I'm just representing it in the text property of a text, of a simple text asset. We are going to use this concept for the next hour, so I won't take more time on this one. Value converter. This is brand new. It was released with IntuiFace version 4.8 a few days ago. It will allow you to convert value from source to your target. So here I'm just going to do a copy, so copy and paste, or just duplicate my text. So it gets the same value, of course. Here in the space content, you can see a little indicator here showing that this asset has one property, the text property, bound to something. When I did a copy, the binding is kept. So its text property is still bound to the clock interface asset. Let's have a look at that. So if I click here, it's going to open automatically with the target here. And the new thing, this new value converter, is something to add between the complete date time here and my text property. So when I overlay this arrange a row, I get an icon here. Click to add a converter to this binding. And here is a brand new banner. The clock IA gives me a full date with the day, the month, the year, the hour. I can use my date format converter to get a shorter view. So here I can enter a format. For example, if I don't want the day, I can just remove that. And this complete date time is transformed into this new one, more shorter. I can change the language, for example, Dutch, or whatever in the list. I will keep the English for the webinar. If I don't know what kind of format I can use, I can just click here to get some help. This will bring you to the knowledge base where you have lots and lots of information. Every interface asset has a full article with all the kind of properties you can use. For example, here, the format samples, I'm going to use those helpers, which are quite short. So if here I remove all that and do LLL. This is a short format. Right, so to work with data, we will need one interface asset to specify the source of the data. Here it's my clock JavaScript interface asset. We will use some bindings to bind the data from the data feed to a visual asset, like a text, like an image. And we might use some converters to specify the way the data is going to look like on the space. Jeff, any question at the moment, or? Okay, no question, I think. So let's go to the first way of loading some data in the experience. So we are going to see two different ways, using a web service and using an Excel file. So here, as I mentioned, I created a new interface asset using a web service from the UK named Zoopla. That's a real estate web service that I can add to my experience. But before that, why does it appear here in my list and it's not in yours? Let's have a look at this folder first. So in My Documents on your hard drive, My Documents interface asset, you can create your own interface assets and add them to the composer. Here for web service, it's what we call a descriptor. So let's have a quick look. I won't go into the details here, but it's just for you to know how you can add your own interface asset. This descriptor, which is written in JSON, basically gives the URL of the web service, a few parameters like the API key that I won't share with you, it's mine, and a few other information. In our case, we are going to see that we have a method giving you a listing of properties. This is the full path to the web service. This web service has some parameters. The area, London, for example, by default, a page size, the number of results, a minimum price, etc. So all the parameters you would expect from a web service. Important thing, the response. The response of this web service is going to be a listings. What is that thing? So the listings is described here. It's an object with some properties like an array which will contain all our results. And every item of this result of this array will be a listing with those different properties. I won't go more into the details. Let's see how it looks like in Composer. So once you have created this IntuiFace descriptor IFD file and an icon to make it nice, it will appear here. So I can just add my interface asset to my experience and look at its properties. So here we find the town, which was the area, the page size, the minimum price. Let's go with 100,000, and other properties you could decide. If you try this with, for example, the weather interface asset, you will get the city or the location property, for example. Now let's see what it looks like visually. So I'm just drag and dropping it on the scene, and I get a lot of things because I don't have the default design for this web service, is brand new one. As for us, we're only concerned by the results. So I'm going to take this, move it up there, and get rid of the other things. Let's have a look at this. So I'm extending. So this is basically a list of which will are the results of my web service call. I'm just going to say make it wider and to see what it looks like. So this is the kind of results I'm getting. Not very nice, right? But basically this is a list of property with an address, a latitude, longitude, a price, and some URLs. Let's create the design for this information. So I'm putting this on the side, and now I'm going to draw to create my own view for every item of this results list. So because I'm not a very good designer, right, I'm going to do something pretty basic. Let's go with a rectangle as the background. We'll go with a 350 by 350. Make it white. Okay, and with a little outline, black outline. So this will be the canvas. I will need a picture to show the house. So let's put a blank picture that I'm importing from the toolbar. And very likely a text, which will be the address or the location. So now, how do I get the real image behind? Normally, you would go into your content library if you had static content and choose it directly here. In our case, the data is coming from the web service, from the interface asset. So I'm going to use the binding. If I open the properties of my image and I go into content, I have my image property, which is here, and I'm going to bind it, not to the clock, but to my real estate web service. So here I'm selecting the target of my binding, where the information is coming from. So these are the properties of the web service itself, right, with the minimum price, the down, etc. And I'm more interested in the results. Look at that. Does it remind you something? Let's quickly compare those two things. This is my descriptor with a displayable address, latitude, longitude, latitude, longitude. Everything that you describe here in this descriptor is going to appear as a property in Composer. And then you just have to do a drag and drop. So let's take the thumbnail. No, thumbnail is not good. Let's go with the image URL. Yeah, this is better. This is good looking. And I'm going to do the same with the text. So let's get the text from my response, my results, and the displayable address. Wow, too big. Let's change the size. Here it is. I'm just going to duplicate that text, maybe to get something like the price up there. So here I'm currently bound to the display address. I want to change that to the price, 100,000. Okay, I don't know for you, but for me, I do not see a price here. I'm just seeing a figure, a number. This is where we are going to use a converter. So I'm going to add a converter between the price information which comes from the database, 100,000, and my text. So let's add this number format. So same as for the clock and the date format, you can click on the help if you don't know how to write format. As for me, I know that I want a currency. I want a separator between my zero, and I don't want the decimals. And maybe I'm going to add a little blank between the currency symbol and the figure. And because we are in UK, I'm going to specify English, United Kingdom, to get the pound symbol. Pretty easy, right? Okay, last thing, we are going to add maybe a little button with something like more details. Let's make this a little bit smaller and put that here in the canvas. Okay, so this will be what we call a data template. The template I'm going to use to visually represent every item of my data feed. So I'm going to select all of those items, the rectangle, the image, and the two text, and the button, and group them, add them into a group. Here you can see I have my rectangle, the white background, my image bound to some image URL property of my web service, my to text, and my button. Okay, I'm going to rename this my data template. Okay. Remember this list on the right side. You can see here a gray line saying data feed. This is the representation of the data feed coming from the interface asset, DIA. So to affect your data template, to this list, just do a drag and drop. You just select the group here and drag and drop it on the data feed gray line. Here we go. I now have a list. Let's change the layout a little bit. Let's make it horizontal. These are all the items, all the response from my web service that I'm getting from the interface asset. And then, because this is just a list, you can change it into an asset flow, for example, and adjust all the visual properties like you may have been doing already within IntuiFace. Pretty fast, right? So we are getting all the information from the interface asset, displaying it in one data template here that is applied to every single item. If, for example, I want to move my text on the right, look at the inverness race here. It's going to move, right? But all the text behind are moving at the same time because I'm modifying a property from the template. Let's go back to our vertical asset grid and put that on the side and have a look at another way of representing the same data. You've seen in the properties that we have some latitude and longitude. So in a real estate service, it's quite common to represent the data on a map. So I'm just going to duplicate my collection and change it into a map. So here I will rename this list into a list, and this new collection linked to the same data feed is going to be my map. I am going to reuse those two items as pinpoints, point of interest. Okay, and now I'm going to create a new data template. On the map, I will only have one button. So I don't want any text. I want this button to be an image button using my two new images, which are point of interest released and point of interest pressed. Because my designer told me to use 48 plus 56 pixels, I will just put 48 and 66. And then I'm just drag and dropping, as I did before, on the data feed. Wow, quite big. So we said 48 and 56. So this is my new list of items, but in a grid. Okay, let's change this collection into a map. So this is my map, because a map is yet another collection which can represent some data. I am just going to put a clear view. Okay. So for the moment, every button, which is my new data template, has a latitude and longitude of 0, 0. Let's bind this position to the data source. Here I am already inside the data feed, so I can directly take the latitude and bind into the latitude, look at the items moving in UK, and then the longitude on longitude. If we have a zoom, if we zoom here, we should see some properties in London, right? every item is positioned automatically thanks to the information coming from the web service. To show you how dynamic this is, I am just going to use another city, let's say Tunbridge here. So my property listings, I'm going to change the town here to Tunbridge, and automatically the web service is called, the new result is displayed here, and I'm getting new information, new results. Let's have a little break. Jeff, any question?
I'm off mute. You can hear me okay, yes?
Yeah.
Can you hear me, Seb?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Yeah, we've had a few questions. One was about working with additional third-party data sources. Could be anything you can think of. You know, we were asked about job postings or SharePoint. Certainly, if it's a web-based service, if it has what's called a REST-based interface, if it can be accessed using REST, then we can work with it. The service decides whether or not they want to have one. They decide whether or not they want to publish it. They decide whether or not it's available for free. So that's not determined by us. It's determined by the service provider. For example, we have a weather interface asset in IntuiFace. You can use it out of the box. It's not our service. It's a weather service in the cloud that we use. And it's a freely accessible service. You don't have to pay for it, etc., so we can just use it. So the answer is you can work with any third party, assuming they have a REST-based interface and that it's been made public. We were also asked about power user capability. Are there advanced things you can do as a developer? Certainly, if you want to work with an external device, we work with a Philips Hue light bulb. You can use the interface asset concept for any device. In terms of data sources, there might be some very advanced things you can do in terms of data retrieval, or maybe doing some of your own computation rather than using value converters. You could do your own work. So certainly there's a lot of extra computation you can do behind the scenes if that would serve your purpose as well. So yes, that's certainly possible. And then finally, if I create a custom IA, can I use it across projects? Absolutely. The interface asset itself is, in a way, just a file, and that file can be copied from one project to another. The data template that you saw Seb build, Seb is showing you one of the interface asset files that he's created, that IFD file. Move that IFD file from one project to the other, and there you go. It's now in a new project. The data template, the visualization, that is something that is technically could be stored locally, but you could also just copy-paste. So that might be an easy way to do it. Okay.
Or you can just create a design accelerator from this data template and store it in your design accelerators library. If you're
an enterprise edition customer. If you're an enterprise edition customer. That's right. That was it.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. Let's move on to the next topic. So we've seen how to use real-time data coming from the web service. Let's see something which might be a little bit more simple to test for you, is to use the most simplest database in the world, Excel. So here we saw that as an interface asset, you can import an Excel file. So let's see what I have here in my interface resources. Just going to open this Excel file to show what we are going to import. So this is the list of, this is an artwork collection, right? So that's a list of different collections, which has artwork name, an artist name, some descriptions, a price, and obviously a picture, which is locally to this Excel file. So if I look next to my Excel file, I have a folder with all my pictures, which are not Excel files. So let's close Excel and import this Excel file. So you will find it here in the same IA panel on top of your scene. If I drag and drop it on the scene, I'm going to see, as for the web service, a raw representation of my data, right? Let's expand it a little bit. So this is a 130, and let's adjust this size. So we have the index, the collection, some positions artwork name, artist, etc. Right? Because the data was on my desktop, I will need to grab this folder, copy it. Whoops, too many things here. Let's do a copy. And then go into my project folder, which is here, which is my documents, IntuiFace, and today's webinar. Into Files, Interface Assets, you will see a folder related to the Excel. You will find the Excel again. You will find an IFD, this famous interface descriptor I've mentioned before. Now the main difference here is that you don't have to write it manually. As for the REST web service, it's automatically generated by Composer when you import your Excel. And here I'm going to paste my gallery of pictures. So it's embedded within my experience. If I publish the experience, the photos will be published as well. And so let's have a look. We are going to create a very simple data template. No group, no button, just an image. And bind its content, its property, its image property to my new interface asset. So not the clock, not the web service, but the Excel, the photo list. So here are my properties. There are the column names that I had in my Excel file. So the collection, the artwork name, the artist, and the photo location. If I drag and drop this one, I will get the first picture in the list. Let's apply this image. Let's call it data template so it's more clear, to my data feed. Same thing, the gray line saying rows data feed. And here are all my pictures from the Excel file. Let's make them a little bit bigger. 250, 250, right. And we are going to show them on a horizontal way, like this, and maybe on several rows. 2, 3, yeah, 3 is good, but a little bit too big. Yeah, like this. This is perfect. So here we are seeing all the pictures from my Excel file with the different collections. So first the vintage cars, then the African wildlife, and then something else. This is a very easy way to do a mock-up of a real web service-based content using some offline data. So if you want to mock up the result of your project, visit your customer with some prepared demo and want to change the content very easily, Excel is a very great tool to do that. Now we've seen we have much more details than a simple picture information in this database. So the scenario is going to be when I click on one of those images, I'm going to fill this more detailed view that I have prepared, and I will display it. Let's unzoom a little bit. I will make this group go up on top of my space. Right? Let's do that. So the first thing is the trigger. I said when I'm going to click this image in my list. But this image, which one? The first? The second? No. Every single image will have the same trigger because it's considered as a data template. So let's add a trigger. When my image is tapped, then I'm going to set information in this group, which is in the front layer, which I have prepared before the webinar. So I have an image. So first thing is to copy or change the content of this image with the current image I have selected in my feed, in my data feed. So I'm going to call an action on the image, which is change image. And as we've done just before that, instead of selecting an image from my content library, I'm going to get the URL from my data feed. So I'm selecting the photo list, the Excel photo list, and here I can select the photo location. Okay. I'm going to do very quickly the same thing with all the, let's do the artwork name at least. So I'm going to do a set text and get the text from my Excel data source, data feed, with the, so with artwork name, so artwork name. Okay. Let's go with the last one, maybe the description, and you will get the point. So I'm getting the text from my Excel file and description here. Now I need to move the group, so I will select my group artwork, and move it to the center here. So let's say I want to move it here. Okay. And I need my, yeah, this is not a good action. I need this close button to move the artwork to its original position. Okay. Let's test that. So this is my list that I can scroll, right, with the different items of my collection. If I click on this car, I'm getting the Beetle comics with the same picture and the description. If I close it and select this image, I'm getting the Majestic Panther, the image, and the description. So we've created a detailed view of a master. If you look on the web, search for master detail pattern. This is a very commonly used pattern in design. And this has been done with only one single trigger and a few actions, because this trigger is used on the first image, the second one, and all the other ones of the data feed. This is the data template concept. Let's go one step further with the data. So we've seen how to load some data, how to display it in a collection, how to display more information in a single view. We're going to see how to work with this data, how to transform it a little bit. So we are going to use Excel filters for that. So I'm going to copy this collection to my new space to play with that. And I will shorten this a little bit. So we've seen we have three different collections in this data feed, data source. The vintage cars, the African wildlife, and the beautiful Thailand. Let's create some buttons on the side which will display only the vintage cars. So this button is going to call an action not on the asset grid. The asset grid is just a visual representation of the data, right? But on the data source itself, which is my Excel file, because as I said earlier, interface assets may have some actions, and Excel has quite a lot of them. Filters, add row that we're going to use a little bit later, clear filters, sorting, and updating existing content. So here we are using to add a new filter on the property collection. Notice that here the properties are the column names as before. So those are really the properties described in the interface descriptor for this specific Excel file. And I want to say if the property collection equals vintage cars, this will be my filter. So let's test that very quickly. If I click on that, okay, I don't have any more African wildlife or beautiful Thailand at the end. If you have a large catalog of products in a retail store, if you have lots of different items in the museums and want to filter per period, for example, this is a very good way of filtering your content. I'm going to add a new one, so I'm duplicating this one to do the African wildlife. I'm going to notice that the action has been copied. I'm just going to say here I want African wildlife and test that. You should think there's going to be an error here, because on my first filter I'm going to say please display the vintage cars, and then I'm going to add a new filter on top of the existing one saying please, among this content, display the ones we have which have a collection named African Wildlife. That's 0, that's no one. I have to remove the previous filter before adding a new one. So on this African Wildlife, I'm going to say on my Excel file, clear the filters, and I'm going to move this action up so it's done before adding the new one. Let's test again. So first, I select my vintage cars. I have the vintage cars. If I click on African Wildlife, it clears the filters and applies the new ones, and I'm getting the African Wildlife. Of course, when we are used to use the filters, you would do this on the first two. So I will go click this one, copy this action, and on my vintage cars, I will just paste this action and move it up. So we get all the things. And you can add the third one and the old filters. Jeff, any question about Excel before we move forward to how to write data in an interface?
No questions about Excel. There was a couple of questions just about the creation of the interface asset itself. Mm-hmm. Just to clarify that for Excel, it's out of the box. You've seen that. There's nothing to create. We natively support the use of Excel. If you want to work with .NET or JavaScript or REST-based web service, you do need to create the interface yourself, which my understanding is not that complicated for a developer. It's not code so much as just reflecting an interface. But all of that is documented online, and I've been linking to that in the answers, in the question and answer chat room there. And we'll re-reference it again at the end of this webinar so people know where to find it.
Okay.
Okay.
So, last part of the webinar, how to write data outside of IntuiFace. So one very common usage, one very common scenario you may want to address thanks to IntuiFace is to get information from the visitor, from the user, the final user who will play with your experience, may it be in a museum, in a retail store, whatever. So because this is a touchscreen, most of the time, they will be able to enter some information. So here I will go ask my visitors to sign a guest book, adding his or her email address and a comment. So I prepared this little layout, and I'm just going to add some text inputs, which are going to be the inputs for the user to enter some information. So this one is going to be my mail input. I love to rename all my assets, all the assets I use here, so it's very easier for me to create my actions afterwards. And I'm going to duplicate this one here and have a multi-line text input. So I need to check the line wrap here. And this is going to be my comment input. Okay. So first thing is, how am I going to send the information from this input, that should be in the group, by the way, to my Excel file when I click the send button. So the trigger is going to be I click the send button. So let's add a trigger on this button. When my button is released, then I'm going to call an action on the Excel file, because here I'm using Excel to record this information. If you have a web service that you want to call with those two parameters, just do it. And by the way, we will do that with the analytics in the very last section of the webinar. So here I'm going to add a row, but not on my photo exhibitor list. So before that, I need to create an Excel file. Let's do that quickly. So I'm starting from a blank page. I need to record an email address and a comment. So let's say email, comment. Here I don't want to read data, I want to write data, so I don't need to fill anything. This is just going to be the model of the Excel interface asset. So let's save this in my resources for the webinar. Form. Okay, and I'm just going to rename here, let's say user info. Okay, done. I'm importing my new Excel interface asset, which is a new one I just created, my form Excel file, which is here. Okay, now let's go back to the send button. So the add row action is not going to be called on the folder list, but on the user info. And now you see that automatically the add row action has now 2 parameters instead of 8 or 10, the email and the comment. We are reducing the name of the columns here to appear as parameters of actions or as properties when you're trying to read the data. Now here I'm not going to enter my email here. I'm going to get it dynamically, not from a data source, because I'm not reading information from the outside world. I'm getting the information from the space, from the visual side, and in this case from the mail input. So I'm getting the text and the text property. For the comment, same thing, I'm going to get information from this comment input. So let's find it. It's inside my space, my comment input, and now see how convenient it is because I've named my asset correctly to find them in the list. Text input, text, okay, and that's it. So let's run that to test it. So here I can enter my email address. I can enter my super comment on multiple lines. And then I can just click the send button. Nothing appears, nothing happens. But let's see what's inside. Very important thing that I say in every trainings I provide. This is the form Excel that I've created first before importing it in Excel. If I open it, it's empty, normal. Because when I imported the Excel file using the toolbar, this file has been copied in my project folder. So if I go back in my webinar current session folder in the files, interface assets, I had the gallery artwork, and now I have a form XLSX folder. And this is the Excel file which is going to be modified and written. And here I have webinar@intulab.com and my super comment on multiple lines. So be very careful about that. As soon as you import an Excel file, it's copied inside the files of your experience, of your project. Cool, very easy to write. But hey, just before that, we learned how to read data from Excel. So I could have just drag and drop this in the space and see that I have my comments here. I can just say here I want to display my information, and if you have a guest book, you can display it in real time. I could say, for example, on my button, after adding the rows, I'm just going to empty my input fields. So my text input, I'm just clicking the empty text field. I'm doing the same action on the comment input with just a duplicate of the action, so it's very fast. And let's test that. So new address at intulab.com, new comment, send. Here it's cleared, and here it's added to the Excel file. The Excel file is reloaded automatically every time you write something into it. So for a guestbook scenario, very easy to set up thanks to Excel. One of my favorite power tools, I would say, with IntuiFace. Jeff, any question about the form and the Excel?
Not really. Hang on one second. There were just a couple of general questions about design. So for example, after you click the send button, can you send them to a new space saying thank you for your submission? And I was just saying that, yeah, it's a design choice. For this webinar, we didn't have a more fanciful sequence of events, but you can certainly design it so that after you click send, maybe it plays a video, maybe it goes to a new space, maybe who knows. That was it.
Okay, just to answer one question I could see. This is how to align at the top. So basically on the text input, you have a vertical alignment property. Okay, so we've seen how to write information to an Excel file. Now let's finish with a web service, how to send information through a web service. And here we are going to use the analytics interface asset that we provide. So you have it, even in the free edition, you can test it. In the free edition of Composer, you can test this analytics. It is very useful to report all the user interaction you want to monitor, or your customers will want to monitor. So here we are going to do 3 different steps. First, reckon the user navigation choices. You may have seen that when I'm in play mode, I can do a gesture on the left or on the right to go to the next or previous space. Those are the triggers on every of my spaces. I have detected swipe left, next. Swipe right, does the previous. So I'm going to add first my analytics. It has only one property, which is collect analytics. If you want to deactivate it while you are in design time in Composer, you can. And then I'm going to add some actions. So when in this space, when I'm doing a swipe left, I'm going to go to the next space, okay, and to call an action on these analytics interface set. So it basically has one single action, which is report interaction with key, value, and comment. 3 fields, but you can fill the way you want. So let's say this one is a navigation action. And here I want to say it's going to go, I could bind it to something, to the time, or it's not very needed, or to a text which has been entered, whatever. Here I'm just going to say that I'm going to go to consult. And I'm going to copy this action and do the same here. And here I will go to, so not consult, but create a form. Okay, so step 1 is done. I'm recording the navigation from this space to the previous one and the next one. Second thing, let's count the number of views for each photo. So let's go back to a previous sample which we created. If you remember here, I was showing a list of photos from an Excel file, and when I click on a photo, I was displaying the detailed view, right? So let's say that when I'm clicking, when I'm tapping this image, I'm going to change the image, set the text, move the group, and say that I want to report an action which was photo viewed or photo tapped maybe. And here is where the binding is useful, because I am in my data template. I can bind the parameter of the analytics to my data feed. So here we are on the photo list Excel file, and I can select the artwork name, maybe, as value, and in comment I would maybe put the price. So let's say photo list, and I'm selecting the price. So now every time I am going to click to tap on a picture, a photo, it's going to set the content of this detailed view with the image, the two texts, move the view in the center of the screen, and send a report that I have consulted a picture with desolation in rust and the price that I haven't displayed here yet. Let's select a second one, the Majestic Panther that I love. Okay, if I go back to with some swipe gestures, so this was the filters. Difficult to do a swipe with a mouse actually. And this is the analytics. So I'm doing next. We will see how to read the analytics afterwards. And just a little previous to show all the different navigation actions. Okay. Let's go back to the analytics. And store some personal information. This was the last use case. So I'm just going to copy this group here and to see the difference. So before we were entering the information in Excel, right? Here I will modify this send button, and instead of adding a row in Excel, I'm going to send a report which will say a user info. Here I will put the mail address from my mail input of this space. Okay. And here I will put the comment. Okay, let's send those ones. Okay, and a comment for my analytics web service. Send. An important thing to avoid too many traffic on the network, we are sending batches of analytics every 30 seconds with a limit of 100 reports. So this is why I'm talking right now, to wait for 30 seconds for my analytics to be sent to the server before I show you how to get them directly from your My IntuiFace account. So if you go to your account in the management console, which I'm going to do right now. So here I am in Chrome. I'm logged in as webinar at intulab.com, my account. In the management console, here, if the network is nice with me, I will see my experiences, my players, and the analytics button here. So I can retrieve, because I have an Enterprise Edition account, I can retrieve all the analytics for the past year for all my devices, or I can filter per device, per type of composers of players, and I can download them as an Excel file. If you have too many records, or if you want to automate this process, we offer some web services to get those analytics automatically. And this is my report. So I had using an Excel file, the photo tapped, the Majestic Panther is here with the price. I have my two navigation actions, to consult, to create a form. I have my user info with the webinar at intulab.com and a comment for my analytics web service, which I just wrote at 3 p.m. in 40 seconds, so I'm nearly in time to end this webinar. Once more, interface assets are very easy to use to read, work with, process, or write data in IntuiFace out of IntuiFace. To conclude this session, and then we'll go through the different questions, have a look in our knowledge base. We have two categories of articles about interface assets and analytics. How to use the off-the-shelf, so the ones that IntuLab is providing within IntuiFace Composer. How to create your own using web services, JavaScript, .NET libraries, or using Excel which are the 4 protocols we support at the moment. And we have one single article per interface asset provided with IntuiFace. On the analytics side, we have an overview explaining how it works, how to use the interface asset, how to download them using Excel or using the web services, and how to delete analytics if you get too many. So thank you for attending this new webinar. I hope it answers quite a lot of your questions. We will provide a record for this one and post it in the coming days. Jeff, any question or last word to conclude the record?
We did have a question about how to submit multiple parameters for a single trigger. And the answer is you add multiple report interaction actions. Each use of the report interaction action enables you to submit one parameter, one key value pair. If you want to submit multiple, then you do multiple actions for the same trigger, which is certainly possible.
Yeah, actually the current version of the analytics gives you 3 parameters, the key, value, and comment we've seen. So for the moment, as Jeff said, you will have to send several actions to call several times the report interaction. Let me show you that. So here I have one report interaction with user info, email, and comment. I could have another one called on the same trigger with another key and some other values bound to something else. We may plan to add more columns here in the future.
Thanks, Seb.
So, thank you, everyone. I hope to see you soon in our next webinars. If you have any questions, please use support.intulab.com. There's a whole team there to answer your questions and help you have fun with using IntuiFace.